Yeah, thanks for the introduction and thanks for inviting me over this year. My name is Milosh and I came over from Serbia, from the city of Novi Sad. That's actually a sister city to Nizhny Novgorod, and it's a big IT center, so I'm pretty excited to be here this year. I have some code samples, so if you want to follow along, and I have a lot of content. I have over like 45 minutes of content, but I have to rush it into 30 minutes. So this is the link down there. So if you want to follow along on your phones, or if you want to see the presentation after the talk, then just copy it over or take a photo. I'll give you 5 more seconds. Basically, this talk is about the stuff that I've been working on over the past few years. And it's mostly UI, and it's somewhere in the middle. It's not totally for beginners, it's not for absolute experts, so I hope to hit some middle ground. If you have any questions, save them for later. We'll have a short discussion afterwards. Okay, so let's talk about quickly why are your app's colors important. Well, the first thing is brand awareness or brand identity. For example, there are a lot of companies that use a specific color, and when you open any of these apps, you will find that color to be dominant. And that's the main reason, but there's a problem with this. So you want to, let's say you want to create a baby care app, and you want to use a lot of pink color. So you create something like this. And this is an issue. Sure, your brand is pink and you want to promote your brand in the best way, but this is not legible. You cannot read this text. So your users will not like this app very much. What you should look to do is use a lot of contrasted colors to increase legibility, to make your apps, to help your users consume content better. So this is an example of a legible app. So this is easy for your users to consume. And the third thing I could think of is to emphasize actionable UI. So that's something like using, if you take a look here, for example, this app wanted to use a dark shade of green, and they used a wrong shade of green because this button looks disabled now, and you don't want to do that. Disable buttons are pale, and actionable buttons are well contrasted. So the black magnifying glass is actionable, and that you're fully aware as a user that you can click on that. And also you're fully aware that you cannot click on the subscribe button. So that's another thing to consider. And now we'll see about what Android offers, how to color your apps using the Android SDK. So the first thing we're going to talk about is styles. Basically, styles are meant for views. You can use this syntax for other stuff, but styles in Android are generally meant to use for views. You put it in an XML file, and that XML file usually is called styles.xml, so it's that simple. You follow this syntax here when you define the style. It's basic XML, and when you want to apply the style, you just place a text view in your layout, and then you say style equals, and then give out your style. And the important thing to notice here is that style doesn't have an Android prefix, so it's not in the Android namespace for some reason, and the other attributes are. So when you get an error, or you don't, depending on which studio version you're using, first check that if you're using the Android namespace or not. Next thing is themes. Themes are targeted to activities of any kind. So it's the same syntax as for the styles, but they apply to activities. This means that whenever you place, for example, a text color into an activity theme, that text color gets applied to every text view in your activity. Which means if you, for some reason, want to have every text view with red text. You just apply this kind of theme, and all of your text views will have red text. Another important thing to note is that we use the name Android namespace here, so it's not theme, it's Android:theme. Another fun example is the day-night theme. I'm not sure when this was introduced, maybe a couple of years ago, but if you want to use this theme, you can Google it, but basically what it does is it allows you to switch to the dark scheme for the nighttime. For example, like 8 p.m. or later, it automatically switches to the night theme. And another help is in the Android Studio, it's called Theme Editor. If you're building a new app, you've probably seen it. If you have a huge app with a lot of styles, then maybe this is not a good idea because it messes up everything. But if you have a small app, try it out. It helps you sort out the theme. It helps you visualize what you're building there. It was also introduced recently, maybe in 2.3, but it's a fun tool to use. And a couple of limitations when using styles and themes. Styles are difficult to set and probably impossible to change programmatically. If you ever try to switch a style, that's a bit complex, but you can get it done. But if you try to change a style, like change one color inside of that style dynamically, you won't be able to do that. That's probably impossible. You can do it with reflection, but it's not the way you want to go. Another thing, SDK versions. If you're working with Android, you're already aware of that problem. And AppCompat is here to help, but it's not the full solution. You still have some quirks. And neither of these, not styles nor themes, can be created programmatically. So if you want to offer like a color picker for your app, you have to predefine several styles and then offer those styles to the user. You can't give them a color picker. It's very difficult to do. It's possible, but it's extremely difficult to do. So these are a couple of limitations I've ran into. Let's go over what XML offers. So a couple of UI elements you might want to style in your apps. This basic UI. These are listed on the right side. And if you want to map that to Android widgets, so we have image view and its subview image button, and you have text view and its subviews button and edit text. I was surprised when I found out first that edit text is actually a subview of a text view, so that's interesting. And then adapter view for list and spinners, and then view group for everything else, basically, including the recycler. These are the most popular widgets that you might want to style and recolor. And then I'll go over a couple of these just to see what XML offers for styling and coloring. So for view, it's basically background and tint. I will have a couple of slides about the tint mode, so ignore that for the time being. So with background, you can put an image, you can put a color. That's for the basic view. And then for an image view, you have one more thing. That's the icon, the main icon. You can still color background and tint. That comes from the view, but the icon and tint come from the image view. So that's beneath there. So source and tint and tint mode. And for the text view, you have a couple of these actually. So the text is obvious, and then hint, it's the text when you have nothing entered in your text view. It's in gray. It looks like it's disabled. It says type in your text here. So that's a hint. And then links, when you're using automatic linking with Linkify or whatever, you can color these links to follow your branding. Shadow, I have no idea what that is. I've never used it, so if anyone knows, feel free to tell me. Probably useless. And then text selection, that's when you move the marker, select some text, and that's the background. Unfortunately, you cannot, as far as I know, you cannot color the text color of that selection. So if your text is red and your selection is red, your text becomes invisible. That's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And then from the view, there's background and tint. And Toolbar is a bit more complex. I'll just quickly skip over it because it's probably not that interesting. You can find it in the slides later. So basically, there's just two things. You style the menu and you style the toolbar with two different themes. And the themes are, they are declared through the XML. You just place them like this. It says Android theme. That actually used to be app theme. Depending on which app compat version you're using, you're either going to get a crash or you just want color. So if you're using the latest app compat, then you're good to go with the Android theme. But for some reason, pop-up theme is still in the app namespace. So again, a weird decision. And it's a lot of text, so you'll find that in the slides later, but that's what you have to do to color toolbar through XML. Okay, let's go over. So we've found out what can be colored in the Android SDK. We've found out how you can declare all this in XML. And then another interesting thing is drawables, because you can, like, you have a lot of icons or backgrounds or whatever you're drawing to the screen using image view, using other views. And all of these are some Android specific objects you know nothing about. You usually just use them. You say get resources, get drawable, just place it there. And if you're using Toolbar and the app compat, it automatically gets colored to a certain brand color or a color from the theme. So you don't think about it a lot, but it's actually interesting what happens inside, and it might be interesting to you to see what drawables offer and how to color them. So let's go over what drawables we have in the SDK. So there are a lot of them, and obviously the app compat variants of all of these. So they did a lot of work developing the drawables. It seems like ages ago, but the first bitmap drawable had a bug where when you loaded an image over, I don't know, it was like something over 100 kilobytes, your app crashes. So they introduced a different bitmap drawable and so on. But the new list is this, and quite comprehensive. So I'll go over only over the basic stuff and the ones that might be interesting for average apps. So about coloring modes. Coloring modes are, in general, it's not related to drawables, but in general, it's a set of instructions basically for the rendering system on how to display colors and shapes when they overlap each other. So I'll show you a few examples, but this is just the basic definition. Alpha compositing is something when you have, it's a process of rendering where you the rendering system picks the new shape based on the two given shapes using only the alpha channel. So only transparent and non-transparent pixels are taken into account. I'll show an example also. And then blending modes are also rendering instructions that are that take both colors and alpha channel into account. And all of this it was first published in a paper called Compositing Digital Images by Thomas Porter and Tom Duff. And it's interesting because now in Android, all of these coloring modes are called Porter-Duff modes. So that's the reason, those two guys. And this is a basic overview of how blending modes work in the rendering engine. And this is the 5 most popular ones. So like screen and lighten are sort of similar. I don't know if you can see, but screen is a bit lighter. And then multiply and darken are two darker shades, but multiply is a bit darker. So it's basically an equation that takes in 2 pixels and produces a third pixel on a bitmap. And then we have compositing modes. So this is the one where both source and destination images are fully opaque. So it's not semi-transparent. And obviously, when they overlap each other, you get various shapes, and the ones that we are especially interested in are source out, source in, and source atop. And that's the reason being is that Android uses these three blending modes, compositing modes, for basic coloring in their code. So these are the ones that you might be interested in as well. And this is a variant with semi-transparent objects. So it's a bit different. You don't get the hole cut out. For example, there was a hole in the middle. Now there is no hole. It's just basically blended pixels with a specific equation. And for bitmaps, okay, we've seen coloring modes, and now we have to deal with how to apply these coloring modes to bitmaps, to other drawables. For bitmaps, you can approach with XML. So XML bitmap points to another bitmap resource file. So you have an XML, and then you have a bitmap, like PNG or whatever, and then you point to that PNG from the XML, and you can add additional attributes. For example, tint, and default tint mode is source in. That's why it was interesting. This is an example of how that looks. So you place the bitmap tag on top, and then you say source, and you point to your bitmap. And then on top, I've underlined the tint tag, so you say tint, and then you say which color resource. And again, this is source in, and you can choose, you actually can't choose the tint mode. They say it's working, but it's not. That's weird. I've reported a bug for that, so if you want to track it, ping me, I can send you a link. And then about vectors, is anyone using vectors? Do you use vectors? Yep. Okay, good. Well, there is something called vector drawable compat. It's basically providing backward compatibility for vectors. And vectors were introduced in Lollipop, but the support was introduced, maybe full support was introduced a couple of months ago, but like good support was introduced a year ago. So it's still a new thing. I'm glad that a lot of you are using vectors. That means that your apps will be much smaller. And then you can use the fill color inside of your vector path to color certain closed path. And that's probably a lot of work. And there's another bug here. I think you cannot use add color / something. I think you have to hard code add color, which is also weird. I don't know if that was fixed, but I hope so. And then backward compatibility is provided to app compat image view. And if you're using app compat activity, you automatically get switched to the app compat image view without you knowing it. That's good. But the not so good thing is you have to use app : source compat instead of Android : source. Here's the example. It's on the bottom. So you have to use source compat, and then you have to use app : tint and app : tint mode. That's probably a big deal for some apps because you have a lot of image views. You can't go over every single image view and switch to the source compat tag. And also you have to put this in your Grail file. So that's what Android offers from XML. And just a few words on dynamic coloring. You can do it from Java or Kotlin. You can use the color utils class. They moved it to the public package. I think that was 22.1. You can use it to do alpha blending to calculate some sort of colors, and then you can use the tint wrapping. Here it is. So it's a lot of code to recolor a single drawable into another color. So if you have like a magnifying glass which is white, you don't want to put in another magnifying glass that is black for another screen. You'll probably want to recolor that same magnifying glass to black, should be simple enough. You can do it through XML, but if for some reason you want to do it from Java or Kotlin, you can do it this way. And that's why I said Porter Duff paper was important, because it's called Porter Duff mode. And I find this source atop mode, I find this one most useful. So if you want to play with this, try different modes. Source atop is definitely doing the right thing. I've used this in production for various types of drawables, even 9 patches, and it's working perfectly, so give it a try. So, but the problem with this is when you wrap a drawable, when you color it this way, they have a cache. The cache is in the Android support v7 widget int resources. There's a cache that actually keeps the instance of the icon you just recolored. So if you've taken this icon, colored it to black, next time you use it with get resources.getDrawable, it will be black. It will not be white. The original color, it will still be black. So you'll probably have to recolor it again to white, and then it will stay white for the next time you invoke it. So that's weird. I didn't like that. And I have a solution for this. I'll show you again. It's sort of a small experiment that you can take a look at and see what this other way offers. It's a bit more difficult, but it offers more flexibility because you don't have to recolor it every time you go somewhere. You just have to recolor it once. Okay, so about stateless drawables. These are drawables that react to your view's state. That means that if your view is in the press state, the drawable will also switch to that state. You can even provide transitions for these drawables. Like any of these 2 states can be changed dynamically using, for example, a fade animation. I think fading is default. I'm not even sure if you can do anything else, but fade is good enough. So these are a lot of states, and let's go over the color state list. So it offers a list of colors. Any of these states are supported, so focus, like a checkable, check, so on. You place a number of items into a selector, and each item is a color. And the important thing to note here, Android matches, it goes from top to bottom, and the first one it matches by the view state, it's the one it uses. So if you have like focused and then checked, it will take the focused. Even though your view is also checked, it will just take the focused one. It will take the first item that it matches. So that means that the default state needs to be all down below. So the default state is the last one in the selector. That's for the colors. And then stateless drawables are basically the same thing, but with drawables. You don't say color, you say Android :drawable. It's basically the same thing, plus you have 2 extra states. I think these are the last 2 activated and window focused. But I've never used the window focused one, so probably useless. Activated is useful. And I think it was introduced in API 11, so you're probably supporting it anyway. Yeah, so this is what Android offers with states and drawables. And then let's do this quickly using Java. So the easy default way to create a color state list, so a list of colors, is to use the color state list.valueOf, and you just give them your color. But the problem with this easy way, it only creates the idle state, and this is the source. So it's in the color state list.java, it's in the Android source. It just creates a new color state list with one color, the idle one. In most cases, this will probably be fine, because all views that use color state lists know that this color is the one they want to use. But if you're doing something complex with colors, then you'll probably hit a bump, and you'll have to do it manually. And let's try the hard or manual way to create a color state list. So the first step is to initialize the colors you want to use. So I've used idle, clicked, checked, selected, and focused. So 5 colors here. All are just random colors. The next step is to create the states explicitly. So this is something you just copy paste. It's confusing. Every state is an array, and there is a reason for it. If you're interested, you can find me later. It's a long topic, it's a long discussion, but it actually makes sense why this is an array, each state. So you've set your colors, you've set your states, and then you create another 2 arrays. That's why I said it's the hard manual way. You create 2 more arrays, one for identifiers, one for colors, and then the constructor of the state list takes these 2 arrays. So it's a lot of work, but if you put it in a method, it helps a lot. It can make stuff easier. And this is how you use it. Generally, if you load from XML, you just say get color state list, you give it the resource, set it to text view, or if you've created a color state list from Java or Kotlin, you can just say text view set text color. It's an overload. It's an overload for that method, and it works fine. It's basically the same thing for the stateless drawable. It's just the same thing. The only difference is you don't create 2 arrays, you add states manually one by one. Also, ordering matters. The first one gets matched. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of stuff, and I did a small example of how this can be useful in an app. Let's say you're building this app, and then you have this animation should have been faster, but okay. So the button icon is white. Highlight is also white, and highlight only appears in the pressed state. So on KitKat, you get, if you do the app compat background, you say its syntax is, I think, question mark attr / selectable item background. So you get a rectangle on KitKat, you get a ripple drawable on Lollipop. So you get different behavior, but still its highlight is white and the icon is white. And let's say we don't like this effect and we want to contrast the icon when it's pressed. So when it's pressed, we want it to go to black to be able to see it on the white background. So this is how we want it to look. So it goes to black and it's perfectly visible on the white background. I mean, it's a silly example, but it's something to play with. And then we want this result, and let's see how we can do it. So you can, first you choose a highlight color, so that's white in our case. Then you choose an icon. This is a magnifying glass, also white. And then you choose the icon color for the idle state, which is white. And everything else is done programmatically. So step 1, do the highlight. So create a stateless drawable for KitKat and create a ripple drawable for Lollipop. Only the press state needs to be colored, so you don't have to color the idle state. And the default way for color state list will do this. Also, default way for ripple drawable will do this. The constructor takes one color, and this will work. So it's easy to do. And then recolor the original drawable using the chosen color for idle. You color it to the contrast color for the pressed state, and you merge those into a stateless drawable. So a bit of work. And then when you have the highlight, when you have the icon, you set both of those to the image view. And then if you're using a toolbar, then this won't work. But if you're using like a normal image view, maybe they like the effect, but I don't want to do this manually. So this is, I've been working on a library called Silly Android. You can find it there. It has a lot more stuff than just coloring, but it's mostly what I do in apps. When I do a new app, I hate doing stuff over and over, and I don't like some of the default APIs in Android. So I built a library to help me combat these problems. And it provides this class called coloring, and it does all of these things for you. So you can just give it a few colors, and it gives you back a stateful drawable. So it does a lot of work for you. And also, it can calculate the contrast color, and it can alpha blend colors, I don't know, whatever you want. It's a lot of stuff. It's like a few thousand lines of code just for coloring. So if you want to try it out, there's the link. And if you want to participate, also feel free to join. And this is basically what I intended for today. If you have any questions, you can ask them now. And thanks for listening.
Morning. Several years ago, when I first started working with colors, I encountered the issue that I need to find an attribute that defines a specific color, for example, toolbar, etc. How may I find the required attribute without digging into deeps of Android SDK?
How to find the attribute in the SDK? Which colors? Or, I mean, are you referring to the documentation in the Android, or?
For example, I don't have a documentation, just an example of toolbar, which defines, which shows some color that I may identify for sure. But I need an attribute. May I find it, or what should I do today?
Toolbar background is color, primary color. Its background is primary color. It's always that. If you didn't recolor it manually, so it's the one called primary color from the app compat or from Android primary color.
Yeah, that's about toolbar, but what if I use some different UI control? And, should I dig into source code of this component, or?
I dig into source code always, unfortunately. I look through sources. I don't find the documentation useful.
Okay, and one more comment about the vector drawables. If I use support library, I face the problem that I need to write some code in activity creation, as I remember. You didn't say anything about it, but if I use compatibility mode, the drawables just don't draw at all. Maybe could you tell something about this?
Yeah, I did have a problem with vectors, and honestly, it worked when we converted vectors to PNGs through Android Studio or through Gradle build. When we converted them to PNGs, it worked perfectly. So the vector is not a problem itself. It's the SDK. And SDK, I think that was, they fix this stuff along. And the new Gradle plugin with Android, for Android, it offers this SDK tag, use compat vectors or whatever. And it gets silently upgraded when you upgrade your Gradle plugin. So that might fix these issues. I haven't tried recently, but I had issues with vectors not drawing. So what I did was I went over to Google what's it called? Android Asset Studio, and I picked one of the images from there, and those worked. But my custom vectors didn't, and they worked when converting to PNG. So I think there's something bad with the library. Unfortunately, I don't know what it is, and I hope it's fixed, because the vectors plugin gets automatically upgraded when you upgrade the Gradle plugin. So let's hope that fixed it.
Okay, thank you for that. You said about caching variables and resources, and we have two options to solve that. First is call mutate on variable, that gives us new variable. And our option, we can simply use different resources for different places in our applications.
Different sources, yeah.
Different variables,
yeah.
Different resources, the same variable with different color.
Yep.
It's in fact increases application size, but
It does.
it's more simpler.
Yeah,
So what do you think about
it's the quickest solution.
quickest solution, but
Yeah.
what do you prefer? What do you prefer?
I'm actually working on an app that has around 500 resources. So copying over, and we offer dynamic coloring for the whole app. So copying over sources won't work in my case. But if you have a small app, definitely go with the copied source. It's the quickest and it won't impact, because all of these resources, they get compressed on building. So you won't get any size increase, really, like 2 kilobytes maybe, but not something big. If you have a smaller app, just go with a source, another source.
Hi, thank you for your talk. Do you really use all styles and terms in your current application? Because as I know, my colleagues download most part of styles, colors, and resources from server. Do you use hard-coded terms or?
We have one, well, in the app that I'm working on, we have dynamic coloring for the whole app. So you can switch colors, and when you press OK, the whole app recolors immediately. So we have a completely custom coloring system. So in my case, we only have one theme by default, and then color everything dynamically. But for other apps I worked on, I did 2 themes. One for development and one for production. The reason being is, for development, I like to change colors to bright red, bright green, something that I can see visually when I'm building. I can see like red rectangle and green rectangle. So for production, mostly one theme. If the client requires a couple of themes for the user to switch, then we build hard code a couple of these. But eventually you run into problems with themes, and you want to do some coloring from the code from Java or Kotlin. That's basically why I did the whole talk. People were interested in that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Milosh, for interesting topic. You talked about vector drawables. Unfortunately, Android doesn't support many modern properties and sub-items of the drawables if you're using vectors. But if we are talking about coloring, maybe you know any solution for using gradients in vectors? Nothing invented yet?
You can hard code it, but it mostly doesn't work properly. So unfortunately, I knew somebody was.
So there is no any solution yet.
You can do the fill path for a single color, and you can do fill gradient, but gradients are still risky. You can try it out. It may work on some platforms, but I think 4 out of 5 times I tried that, it didn't work. So.
And what's your opinion? Can we expect
Sorry?
support in future?
API 27.
But 27 is already here.
App
And
compat
there is no gradient.
28. I'm hoping. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Еще вопросы?
Milosh, thank you for an interesting lecture. And you mentioned such a tool as the editor in Android Studio. What can it do? Is it possible just to perform a simple coloring, or it can, for example, generate 9-page bitmaps for background for some use?
No. It generates themes. So the XML, your theme, it does that. But for 9 patches, use Android Asset Studio. It's built by Roman Nurik. He's on the Android platform. I think he's in the design team, but it's called Android Asset Studio, and it offers coloring and resizing and all sorts of stuff for icons, for Toolbar, for launcher, for It doesn't offer adaptive icons yet, but it's getting there. For Toolbar, for Launcher, for status bar, for generic icons, and 9 patches. So it has everything, but the theme editor only offers colors and just attributes for the views, not drawables.
Thank you.
Getting back to the example with Toolbar icon, you said that you need to define two different resources for different APIs. For example, right one, background, drawable. Is it possible to define only color and use the system default resource, not to define Recolor and color differently?
Yeah, sure. You can do that, but then if you in Toolbar, it's very difficult in the default Toolbar. I just put that example because it was easy to find online, but on the Toolbar it's difficult. But on image view, you can use 2 XML drawables for 2 states, and then tint one in white, tint one in black. You can do that, for example. XML drawable that points to another PNG drawable, then color one XML to white and the other one in black. You don't get a size bump, but it probably fixes the issue.
Yes, tint may fix this issue, but not for each color. And another question.
Not for each color. Yeah, not for each color.
Another question: is it possible to use vector drawables as 9 patches? As far as I remember, only drawables, PNG drawables may be defined as 9 pages, but in some example I had to use vectors. Is it possible?
To recolor 9 patches?
To use vector drawables as 9 pages.
I don't think so. Vectors, I don't think so. Because 9 patches they're very specific format with black bars on each side. And vectors are just paths. So if you stretch them, that probably look weird. Yeah. No, not supported.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the speech. Do you have any cases that you have to share resources between projects and how you solve it?
Resources like colors or icons? Between projects in Android or Android iOS?
In project Android.
In Android. I just copied over stuff, but the library that I worked on, it actually has some resources like default text sizes, default margins, paddings, stuff like that I always copy over from one project to the other. That's the main reason why I built it. So I just include one line and get everything I'm used to on another project. So that's a way you can publish a library and then you use the library everywhere.
Okay, I have one more question. Does Android support library vector drawables fixes some bugs for Android? Or if I have SDK 21, I can use Android vector drawable support directly without support library?
If you have minimal API,
Yeah.
okay.
Or support library fixes some bug which was on Android lollipop, for example.
It usually tries to fix bugs. But I've recently had a bug with OpenGL Service, and it's a huge bug. When a GL service is placed into a view pager, it gets stretched randomly when you swipe left, right? It gets stretched randomly. So AppCompat didn't fix that, but the default SDK did. So that's weird.
Thank you.
I just want to say that